I'd like to welcome on stage someone who you've just seen in the clip before. Her name is Nolizwe Mhlaba, and she will be presenting the panel discussion leading the Anzisha Scenario panel. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nolizwe Mhlaba, and if you're just tuning into CNBC now, we are just kicking off the second half of the Very Young Entrepreneur Education and Acceleration Summit. Thank you for joining us. So many of us in this room can agree that there are some projections about the future that are difficult to dispute. And actually, some of these data points have been repeated throughout this day. And I'm talking specifically about the burgeoning African population, as well as the rising unemployment rate amongst youth. These aren't just future possibilities, but actually a reflection of the current reality in many African countries. Now, trying to predict the future could be a futile exercise, but I think it's important for us to really, try to prepare for the future and its outcomes. And here at the Anzisha Scenario, we have chosen scenario planning as the tool through which to explore what the next 30 years might look like on the continent. So, we conducted some research, which you can download at anzisha.org/scenario. And as a result of that research, we outlined 3 possible future scenarios. And I'm just going to walk us through those scenarios for a moment. Okay, so scenario 1. This scenario sees us continuing on this path of incremental change, where there are interventions, but the impact isn't significant enough to actually absorb unemployed youth in the foreseeable future. Okay, then we can look at scenario 2. Now, with scenario 2, there's a recognition that entrepreneurs are key drivers of job creation and economic growth. And in this scenario, it's important for older people with entrepreneurial experience to actually drive this growth that we see. The third scenario is one that also focuses on entrepreneurship, but in this case, we are centering young Africans. And this third scenario is the one that we are calling the Anzisha Scenario. Okay, so over the next few months, what we would like to do is engage in a multi-stakeholder dialogue across the continent where we really interrogate what it looks like in the future if young people are choosing entrepreneurship and hiring their age mates or their peers. And we would like to be able to take this campaign across the whole continent and get diverse perspectives, because while we may have a shared vision for the future, the journey to get there could look different, across our many countries. So we would like for you to join this conversation on social media using the hashtag that you've heard from earlier in the day. That's hashtag Anzisha Scenario. And let's move from just raising awareness on the issue of youth unemployment to actually changing mindsets and attitudes towards youth entrepreneurship, and eventually going to a stage where we are orienting ourselves in the direction of taking concrete action to enable and better support young African entrepreneurs. So let's just take a moment to see an example of a young entrepreneur whose story, I think, illustrates for us a possible pathway in the Anzisha Scenario. So just tune in for this next video.
Today we are at Masindi Islamic Primary School, and this is one of the schools the Art Planet Academy works with. We are here to do a practical training in vegetable production. We're going to divide yourselves. The youth of today do not treasure agriculture so much. Why? Because they are sure even if they practice agriculture, they will still remain poor. If I want to transform Africa through agriculture, I'll have to train a 9-year-old child how to practice agriculture sustainably so that by the time they are 15, they are actually already practicing. Hello, my name is IGNATIUS. I'm a co-founder of the Art Planet Academy, and I'm here to say that it starts with you, with you, with you, and you, with you. Growing up, I hated farming so much. My dad was a farmer. He was very poor. And stories had it that our ancestors were also farmers, but they were still poor. So as a child, I knew that if I do agriculture, I will definitely be poor. I had it wrong. I remember dropping out of university. I was a medical student. I left school and went for an agriculture course. Education plus the practical knowledge that I had brought about innovativeness. So I was forced to think on how to change the education system in the only one subject that I performed well, probably because I was born in a farming family. That's how I realized my fortune in agriculture. As a result of our trainings, smaller agriculture enterprises are established within the schools. Now, these micro-agriculture enterprises help a school save a lot of money every year. When this similar project is replicated in the homes of the children, families are able to raise income for themselves and also feed themselves.
The trainers came at our school, trained us how to make a nursery bed. So even me, I took that skill at home. In my first harvest, I got 5 bags. I sold them, I got 100,000 shillings. That helped my parents pay for my school fees.
Ati babiri wange ono bwakuba kuziri alina obukugu obwo obwafunire ku lugamba Art Planet bw'araba n'asobola kukola omulimu ogwo akasira kataito kano akusobola kugukora mu musiro gukooto kandi awo n'asobola n'okuleetayo bagenzi be abatalina emirimu we n'abasasura kandi nawe wenka hanyuma tunzire n'afuna sente n'asobola kweyemereza nk'omuntu.
The relevance of starting young, especially with entrepreneurship, is you grow with whatever you are doing, you keep learning, and it creates an opportunity to inspire other young people, because whenever they see you doing it and you're young, it makes them believe that it's all possible. Even at a young age, you can start an organization and grow with it.
Innovativeness is key to becoming a successful agriculture entrepreneur. The ability to see business where no one sees business will help you make money. I think usually zikirakuwa branches and leaves, at times fruits. As an entrepreneur, there are times when you feel the business is failing. That courage to keep going when no one else would go is the reason as to why you'll become a successful entrepreneur. In most agriculture-based countries of Africa, you realize that irrespective of the degree course you do, irrespective of how far you go in terms of studies, at one point in time you'll have to come back home and practice agriculture. We want to become the African Leadership Academy for Agriculture. We want to develop the next generation of young agriculture entrepreneurs across the African continent and our country.
There are many incredible young people like IGNATIUS across this continent, and I think what the Anzisha scenario is aiming to do is to explore what are the opportunities, what are the challenges, and what are the drivers for actualizing a situation where they can be successful in their chosen enterprises. So now I would like to formally launch the Anzisha scenario campaign by calling up a panel of experts who will explore the feasibility of the Anzisha scenario and perhaps even question if it's a desirable outcome for us. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our moderator, Mr. Yinka Adigoke. And I'm going to ask the panelists to join him on stage. So join me in welcoming Mr. Kofi Asuon, Ms. Elizabeth Bintliff, Mr. Eko Mensah, and Mr. Sbusi Soleope. Thank you.
No, that's fine. Okay.
Hello to everyone at home and watching on CNBC, and obviously welcome to the audience and to my panelists. Very excited to be here at the Very Young Entrepreneurs Education and Acceleration Summit at the Hilton Santon in Johannesburg. This is a topic that I, as the Africa editor of Quartz, find particularly interesting and particularly passionate about how we develop more entrepreneurs on the continent. And the thesis of the research by Anzisha is particularly fascinating because it sort of challenges a lot of the long-held beliefs that many of us have, and also gets us to also see some things that we kind of know already happening, but then gives it a formal framework. But just as Nolizwe was saying there, it's also worth challenging and discussing whether this, the way it is framed is the best way to think about it, because while we kind of essentially all have the same sort of hopes for more innovation, more entrepreneurship across the continent, we possibly all come to this in all very different ways, and it's why we have a panel discussion like this. So I'm just going to read out the sort of the Anzisha scenario. What it generally does is it proposes tackling youth employment by economic growth, higher levels of education, and investment in entrepreneurs of all ages, but with a special focus on very young entrepreneurs. Anzisha believes entrepreneurship must be seen as a career where you can gain as much experience through an entrepreneurship career, getting better and better as you go along, as we saw on the video, and just as you would if you worked in a corporate environment. So I'm going to start with the panel by I want to sort of understand your vision, how you see things going forward. And I'm going to start to my immediate left, and I'll ask you, Elizabeth, how do you see, if we did achieve this scenario where we're investing in more young entrepreneurs, and young entrepreneurs are employing other young people, how do you see this working out in terms of jobs and employment in Africa?
Thank you. I think that we have an imperative to pursue this scenario. I don't think it's really much of an option for us. And I think in many ways it's happening, but it's not happening at a big enough scale that it needs to. When we look at the macroeconomics of just about all African countries currently, even though we're touting a lot of growth, and that's positive, but job growth is not keeping up with the number of young people that we're graduating. Every year we graduate about 11 million young people from schools across this continent, and we only create about 3 million jobs. So young people by default are becoming entrepreneurs because they are not able to find the work. It's taking the average young person about 6 years to find their first job on this continent. So I think the scenario that pursues entrepreneurship, and one in which they are not just job takers but job makers, is one that we have no option but to pursue, because that is really, I think, in my view and in my experience, what's going to close the gap to create the future that we want in terms of employability on the continent.
Yeah, that's fine. And I'll go to you, Kofi. I mean, how do we change that mindset from job takers to job makers? How do you see that developing?
Well, I think that by all of us being here today, we were starting that conversation, and it's just to really formalize the approach in regards to supporting very young entrepreneurs. If the continent is one of the youngest continent in general in regards to youth, and also we see that based on the research that young people are hiring more young people, older folks are hesitant on hiring young people.
Right.
And as we, the continent, continue to become younger and younger, who's going to hire the young folks if we are not able to pursue a different pathway for them to actually be hired by other young folks? And so for me, I think that this scenario really gives us an opportunity to really just sit back and say, okay, what we're doing, is it working? What are the gaps? And right now, the gaps that has been identified is how do we actually engage and mainstream the support of very young entrepreneurs?
And I'll again follow on from that. You, Echo, what's your vision for mainstreaming this sort of scenario? I mean, I should probably start by asking if you agree with it.
Oh, I mean, if we didn't, we wouldn't fly and come and join you. I think that we buying into this is an indication of our passion and our buy-in into this vision. But for me, this whole scenario and our efforts at building entrepreneurship and making it a normal thing goes beyond just creating jobs. You know, getting parents, stakeholders, guardians, and people that spend money to take us to school to understand and accept that entrepreneurship is just one of the many options that they would wish for us that maybe before we get to that point where it becomes normal, they wouldn't have. So for me, it's about mindset change, not just for the young people, but for the people that look at us disappointingly when, you know, we say, okay, yes, we've gone to school for you, but we want to do this for us. I want us to get to the point where there is a general acceptance that this is a path that we can take. And when we get that support from home, when we get that support from the community, when we get that support from people that matter to us, it boosts our confidence to want to go on this journey. Beyond that, I think that it also helps young people to understand that getting a career or working or finding a job shouldn't just be in the established enterprises, you know, where everybody comes out of school and they want to work in a bank or an insurance company or some very lucrative and very attractive enterprise. Working in an SME, working in a startup, working in an untested water and untested industry is equally as, you know, as good as any other, you know, and that's what this would help to do. Because at the end of the day, if we have all these industries, we have all these companies, we have all these startups, and nobody good enough is to work in it, then what is the point? How do you scale up? How do you grow? And you know how, if you don't have the money, if you don't have the system, the structures, and the resources, you don't attract top talent. So then if these businesses that we are trying to, you know, set up and help young entrepreneurs to set up are not attracting top talent because they don't have the resources or it's not tested and tried, then how do they scale up? How do they grow? So for me, I'm excited because then they get to accept it at a younger age that it's normal to work in an entrepreneurial environment. It's normal to get 1/10 of what you would have gotten, you know, if you were working in an established organization, because you are helping to build something that would, you know, create an opportunity for thousands and thousands of people after school, or even those that are out of school. So for me, that's what excites me about this, something like this.
Sibu, I'm hearing a lot of what we want. We all want this, but how do we do it? How do we achieve this vision that we seem to all agree that we want for more young people to be able to set up businesses and build them?
Yes, sir. I think it's got a lot to do with policy change. I think Africa, the way it was divided by the colonials and how everybody took for themselves and how they colonized the different countries, they created borders. And where we are right now, where we find ourselves is our leaders a lot of them are getting corrupted, you know. A lot of the people that keep wanting to take our minerals to the West or wherever are always corrupting certain governments. There's a lot of corruption in a lot of African countries. So the education system, so policy change, different sectors, especially in education. So if you find that entrepreneurship becomes compulsory for young people, especially high school level, I do feel that it will make a very big impact because...
But sorry, can I just be, to be clear, what you mean by entrepreneurship becomes compulsory, you mean to teach them entrepreneurship, or do you mean everybody has to set up a business?
Everybody, both.
Has to set up a business.
And I want to be specific by saying social entrepreneurship. Okay. Social entrepreneurship is where you don't put profits forward, but you put the people forward and the country forward. And then the profits follow. If we can teach and force young people, high school level, to go through learning social entrepreneurship, even if they don't become entrepreneurs afterwards at a later stage, when they do get to work for companies, they're going to work for companies with that entrepreneurial mindset. Now, if I'm working at a company and I treat that company like it's mine, if I'm working at a company and I'm encouraged to be innovative, if I'm working for a company and I'm encouraged to be creative, and I'm working for a company and I'm comfortable and I love what I'm doing, I'm going to excel and I'm going to perform a whole lot better than somebody who's just there for a paycheck. So it's pretty much policy change, and the most important part obviously being education.
That ties into your work, Elizabeth, this idea. And it's kind of, it was very interesting if you read the Anzisha report. They make a distinction between entrepreneurial skills and entrepreneurship. And I know a lot of your work is around developing sort of skills, you know, generally life skills, but clearly
generally life skills, but also entrepreneurial skills. And I think it's, Spoo talked about starting at high school, and I think the scenario talks about starting at high school. But I would even dare say that we need to start earlier. And the reason I'd say that is because there's evidence that exists that, you know, young children know as early as age 8 what kind of lifestyle they want to live. They know what kind of car they want to drive, what kind of house they want to live in, what kind of, you know, amenities they want to have. What they don't understand is what it takes to accomplish that. So if you tell an 8-year-old, when you grow up, you can make $20,000, they're going to think, woo, I'm set, you know. But when you start explaining to them what it takes, you know, and taxation and all of the, you know, financial implications, then they start really thinking about their life. So I think that that's as young as when we need to be introducing entrepreneurship. And I also think entrepreneurship in Africa especially has a branding problem. Because, again, I spend a lot of time with young people, and when I ask them who they aspire to be or which entrepreneurs they look up to, they predominantly will name Mark Zuckerberg and Richard Branson. And very few of them can even name an Aliko Dangote or a Strive Masiwa or Folorunsho Alaki, you know, an African entrepreneur. So I think that that's a problem. I mean, let alone even recognize somebody in their neighborhood who is solving a problem or running a business as an entrepreneur. So I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding of what it is, which needs to be addressed, and then also addressing, you know, the attractiveness of it as well as the pathway to become one.
Once these young people start to, you know, we get the ideal scenario, scenario as we've laid it out, and young people start to build businesses, and we're down the road, we're in 2019 now, say it's by 2030, and we are looking at any one country. We say we're in South Africa right now. Let's take South Africa. How do we know that we're on the right path? You know, what would you be looking at, Kofi, at MasterCard Foundation? You supported a lot of various programs, and you're perhaps advising a policymaker. What would you sort of be looking for? What metrics would you be looking at to sort of say, I think we're on the right path, or I think we're, you know, you're not going to have enough people here. You're never going to meet your targets. What would you look out for?
You know, currently we just came out with a new strategy, and you know, a key component is job creation and employment. I think that is, you know,
how many jobs these businesses are building.
Because at the end of the day, that's why we want the youth to transition. But I think that one emphasis that we put on that piece is fulfilling and dignify, you know, for the youth themselves. And they're the one who will basically define what that means to them. So it's not just about the job creation, about the number, but at the same time is for youth to actually sit back and say, and tell all of us what counts the most to them. And if they find value in the job that is being provided to them, or the business who's providing that opportunity to them. So for us, really, just looking at absolutely the job creation, but also incorporating the youth voice within that aspect of job creation, fulfilling, dignified for them, and for them to actually let us know if they see that as a success, because they're all jobs that are being created, and people working in horrible conditions. So we should definitely
That's a good point,
recognize that as well.
Yeah, I mean, the research seems to show that, and I think this is, again, part of behind the thesis of the research, that young businesses, small businesses creates many of the jobs in a lot, particularly in Africa. So obviously, if you create more, so the idea being that if you create more young companies, you create more jobs, and so on. I mean, what if you? I'll ask that same question to you, Eko, actually, because this also ties into your work in terms of the things you'd be looking out for to ensure that if this is going to work in any country, because we're not just thinking about the monolith of Africa. For it to work in any country, what would you be looking out for? Say, if we're talking about Ghana, which you're very familiar with.
Okay, so for me, and it ties in with what Elizabeth said. When we talk about, first of all, a young person or youth, the people that have what it takes to give us the opportunities we are looking for, what comes into their mind? And even in my country, Ghana, I'm always asking the youth that are always trying to get give us opportunities, pay attention to us. I ask them, what is the economic value of you, the youth? Like, have you ever thought about it? That yes, Ghana is made up of, or Africa is made up of predominantly young people and the youth. What is the economic value? And who really cares? Because at the end of the day, when these policymakers, the leaders, our parents, our teachers, and all that, when a young person comes to mind, what do they associate the young person with? Is it something that would let them, give them that kind of seriousness they need to let them move to the next level in whatever they are doing in line with entrepreneurship? Or is it something that is going to make them feel like, this is just a stage in their life, they are experimenting, so yeah, I mean, you need 10,000, okay, I'll just give you 100, It tells you that they don't associate young with seriousness. Okay. And in Africa, young is about muscle. Power is about, hey, let's go out there and campaign for these politicians, let's win power, and then they call them foot soldiers. Yeah. Because young is attributed with strength. Now, we are coming with an initiative, or the initial scenario, what I see is changing the mindset of who a young person is and attracting to us that kind of seriousness we need to make sure that our contribution is regarded and we are given the support to be able to scale up and make it sustainable. That's what I am excited about, and that's what I think would be one of the objectives and what I'm looking at this, achieving. Yeah. If you talk about a young person who wants to go into business, he needs to attract that kind of attention. That would let investors listen. That would let policymakers listen. That would let his teachers listen, that I need some time off to go and test run my idea. I need to look at my business model. They need to make sure that the young people are not just young in strength, but young in mindset. So it changes our mindset. It changes our outlook, our culture, our system, and everything that would help us to ensure that if we're going to do this, we're going to do it with all kinds of seriousness, because the people that have the opportunity and the money, they see us like that. Yeah. And then when we put it out there, they're going to support us to scale it up. And it's going to have a ripple effect, because young people, we grow depending on the kind of environments that we find ourselves in. And peer-to-peer always helps us. So if I see other people doing it, the tendency that I will also do it is high. And it would have that ripple effect that would, enable us to change the continent. We
seem to be suggesting that just like entrepreneurs, young people have a branding problem.
Exactly.
Right? In Africa. Well, you were going to follow up, Sibu?
I just wanted to add on to what he's saying. He's definitely spot on. He's correct, because young people do as we do, not as we say. So when they see others doing something, they do the same. And I've experimented with this over the past couple of years. One of my businesses is a beverage brand company called Mofire. Started out as an energy drink. We've just been diversifying. We're launching a CBD infused drink now. And my brand struggled to get into retail in South Africa. It was really tough. I didn't give up. What I did was, I've got a very big social media following because of the work that one has been doing on television and on the radio. I took advantage of the social media following, and I would take the cans and the drinks with my team, and we'd go to street corners and sell the drink for 10 rand. Yeah. And people would think we're crazy. And we did that over and over and over and over every week. We'd do it in Durban, we'd do it in Cape Town, we do it in Joburg, we do it in the township, we do it in the townships, and this was an ongoing thing until such time that it started becoming cool to actually sell in the streets. And then our video started going viral. When our video started going viral, young people who are sitting in the township or students started thinking, hey, here I am, I'm broke, and I've got pride to go sell in the streets because what are people going to say? But because they're seeing us do it and everybody else do it, then they started doing it, and that's how my business has been able to survive to this day, and it's been growing like crazy. Now, what I've started to see as a trend is also other brands who are not necessarily beverage brands, other companies doing the same. So I'm starting to see cool people just going out in the streets, either handing out flyers or selling stuff.
So
it's starting to become a norm. And I remember when we started out and started shouting entrepreneurship, I was actually working with CNBC just before then. This is like about 5-6 years ago. Entrepreneurship wasn't as cool as it's becoming right now. And I'm loving the fact that there's a buzz, there's a lot of young people that are excited, that are getting into entrepreneurship. And I think technology is helping us because a lot of them are on their phones. And when they're on their phones, they're always just, they bump into these videos of entrepreneurs preaching this entrepreneurship language, or people their age doing similar work, starting their own, not only just t-shirt brands, because all along it just used to be t-shirts, but now young people are becoming more and more innovative.
Let me stick with you for a second. It's come up on previous panels and in workshops, this idea of one of the roots at which we change attitudes is with parents and with teachers. How do you see us? I'm interested in your ideas, even though we've heard some other ideas today, in terms of making teachers encourage this, even if they don't have programs yet in their schools, so that if a student comes up and says, I want to do, what DJ Subu's doing, and, get out there and sell something, they don't just laugh them off.
Yeah.
Or parents who are more concerned with, their child following a straight and narrow path.
Parents have to be involved.
Yeah.
We have to be involved. And I know it because of my own parents. I've been self-employed throughout my career. And it's mainly because of my mother. My mother has been self-employed through and through. And every time when I'm with my mother, if she doesn't have a hair salon, she's got a spaza shop. If she doesn't have a spaza shop, she's selling clothes. If she's not selling clothes, she's getting a little small tender to go clean, and she's getting mamas from our street in the community. See, she's hiring about 10 or 20 of them. She's paying them, they're going to clean in the suburbs. My mom has just always been like that. She's always been a hustler.
Right.
And just me being next to her and seeing her do that over and over, little did I know that I'll become an entrepreneur eventually. But it's because of something that I've been exposed to the whole time. And initially when I started getting into entrepreneurship, my mom was against it. But as time went on, for me, the answers were always, but you taught me this. I saw you doing this. You used to do people's hair. And you used to force me when schools were closed. I used to be so irritated, wanting to go play with my friends, and you wanted me to be in the salon and work with you. But then that helped me because I was always next to her. I learned how to, money, inventory, stock taking, and all of that. I learned all those things. Little did I know it was preparing me to become an entrepreneur. So parents are very vital in being involved and encouraging their children to become entrepreneurs. Yes, it's a little bit difficult if you're not an entrepreneur and your kid is telling you about things that you also don't understand, but I think it's high time that we need to encourage them.
Right. Any thoughts?
I would add that, I think your mom was an outlier in many ways, because I think the vast majority of parents in Africa still want their children to pursue a more traditional route. Parents want to be able to tell their friends at church what it is that their child does. They want to be able to narrate their credentials. That's very important. And I think that's part of the reason why entrepreneurship is having a difficult time catching on as mainstream, is because we don't have the same kind of credentialing system as we do, with formal education. So, you can't say you have your GCSE, or you can't say, you have your degree. So I think that that's something that's critical in order to satisfy the societal and parental thirst for credentials and for language to talk about the achievements of entrepreneurship, is that we need to have some kind of credential, that is recognizable at a macro level, that says you have acquired a certain set of skills, and not just, because even the most successful entrepreneurs, and many people will tell you this, are running successful businesses, and their parents are still asking them, when are you going to stop this and get a real job? That story is told so many times over. So I think that that's something, and not just doing it to satisfy the parents, but there's real value in entrepreneurship education, and I think most people who've gone that path would also say that they wish they had somebody. You had your mother as a mentor, but a lot of people are still figuring it out. And to be able to have some kind of system where people can go and learn some basic skills, knowledge, language,
Right.
and even just creating an ecosystem of support, I think will help us along to mainstream this and make this debate more inclusive.
I have a problem, and my problem basically is that for a lot of the players in the entrepreneurship ecosystem, especially across Africa, we are more concerned with quantitative as against qualitative, and I think that that's where some of the problems are. We're concerned about the masses. I mean, we train 3,000 people, we incubate 600 people, but we never come back to say 60 of them have built a multi-million business. You know, so then to our parents, to the stakeholders, like, oh, this is something you need to try. You know, it's like an extracurricular activity. So then, yeah, go do it, have fun, you know, but when you're done, dusted, go find a job. You know, and if that continues, this is what we're going to face, no matter what effort or money or resources we put in. And it goes back to what he was saying about policy. As much as we're trying to do this, private sector and all the donors and all that, we need to still engage government. Africa, we cannot do this by ourselves. Sure. At the end of the day, if we don't mainstream it, if it doesn't become part of our education, where in the school, entrepreneurship is normal, we will still see it as an extracurricular activity. And no matter what, they will say, go, especially the parents that are understanding and then they are modding and social media people and all that, you know, like, okay, just do it. Just like football, 36, you know, finish and go get a job. And so as much as we try to do this, as you said, we need to tell the success stories. And it has to be figurative. We need to put numbers to it. You know, if it's social impact, fine. But then if you talk about business, it's about numbers. And I don't get that sense whenever we are dealing with entrepreneurs and looking at some of these programs. We are excited about they are picking up the skills, they are learning, they are pitching and all that. But we are never talking about, you know, and in Africa, really, if you ask somebody who is into business, their numbers, they either get offended or they think you're from government or something. And nobody is willing. You know, and when you compare it to the Western world and everything, people are talking about entrepreneurship in numbers. So Amazon is worth this. Then the respect comes automatically. You get it? But if you talk about African business, if you talk about, you know, even the so-called businesses that are doing good, in numbers, it doesn't add up. So for me, that's, if we want to mainstream, we have to engage government. We have to make it, this is it, entrepreneurship. And then move to the numbers. Look at qualitative as against quantitative.
So what you're suggesting there is more transparency, more celebration of entrepreneurs. You know, let's make that a bit more part of our culture. I want to get on to something that we are all familiar with in terms of the way we analyze Africa and African economies, which is that a good part of a good portion of our economies, no matter which country you're in Africa, is in the informal sector. And as we talk about entrepreneurship, that's where the vast majority of African entrepreneurship exists. You know, so this discussion we're having now about more young people being entrepreneurs, I'm trying to understand how we put it in the context of a more formal economy, or if that's even relevant. Can things just go on as they have been in the informal sector, just with slightly better conditions and a better attitude towards entrepreneurs, or do we really need to figure out ways to bring young people or young entrepreneurs into the formal economy for this to really scale at any kind of level? Because the whole idea of all these young people starting businesses is not for them to just employ their siblings and a couple of friends for the rest of, for the next 40 years. It's to build something. Not everyone will, but hopefully some of them will build much bigger businesses down the road. So let me start with Kofi. Like, how do you think there's a way do you think it's important to get these next generation of entrepreneurs who will employ other young people to pull them into the formal economy as quickly as possible, or do you think we should just let it all happen organically and no need of policy change.
Before Kofi jumps in, may I?
Please.
I feel very strongly about this because I think a lot of the conversation around the formal and informal sector tends to be around formalizing the informal sector.
Yes.
And I think that that's a very, it's a very uphill battle. It's a big challenge for Africa because the informal sector is so vast.
Yes.
And there is some formality in the informal sector. I mean, it looks to the naked eye, it looks like it's just disorganization and chaos, but there is some organization around it. I think the conversation needs to be more around revaluing the formal sector, in the informal sector, which employs so many people.
Yeah.
And I think it's really about destigmatizing the jobs and the opportunities that exist in that sector. So I think that that's the first thing that we need to do. I'll just say that.
No, I mean, you can speak for me anytime you want. No, but, I once came across a gentleman in the informal sector, I won't say which country, who was selling a certain calling minutes, for the airtime.
Oh, yes. Airtime.
And along our conversation, he looks at me and he say, "Why are you here?" And I said, "I'm here to meet with private sector and talk." And he's like, "You didn't invite me." And I said, "Well, yeah, sure. Yeah, you're right. I did not invite you to this." He's like, "Listen, we are the private sector."
Yes, exactly.
And it took me a while to understand what he was saying, but he said, right now I have about 15 youth. I have people working in different corner of this community selling these airtime. If tomorrow I decide to shut it down, it will impact. Let's just say if we all decide to shut it down and not sell any, it will impact, the private sector. So we are actually the private sector. So you need to invite us to this conversation. So it completely changed my view in regards to the informal and informal sector. But there's one thing that I was asked one day, and it was a simple question. Do you think innovation happens in the informal sector? And if your answer is yes, then continue to support, and let it take its course. Let the innovation take its course, which is extremely important as we're looking at informal versus formal or formal. The reason that we're saying this is that, there is innovation that's happening. The private sector is booming, and the informal sector, the people who are real estate agents in the informal sector, and from your observation from the outside, it seems like it's not organized. People are just selling things left or right, but it is really organized, to a certain extent. And there are actually some people for lack of better, are hiding, making a lot of money in the informal sector. So we also have to recognize that.
But I think the frame of my question is kind of also about how these businesses will scale. Because I'm thinking about, slightly different for a MasterCard Foundation, but for many potential investors who might want to invest in your business, who want to help your business scale, they want to see your books, they want to see all kinds of formal information about, taxes and all, different bits of paper trail. If you are the dude selling airtime and you can't show all that paper trail, but you're clearly a very smart entrepreneur and you know how to, make a profit. How does this work? If, does something need to change there to really take these businesses to the next level, or is he just going to stay in his neighborhood selling just within that area? And I don't mean to sound disparaging. I'm just trying to give some sort of context to the question.
I totally agree. I see a lot of small businesses in the informal sector. A lot of them are not structured. Some of them are doing really well, but they're not structured. And which is why you find organizations like these and a whole lot of other incubators out there and people that care about entrepreneurship, helping small businesses to formalize themselves and, have their books in order, etc., so that they're able to have that paper trail, and it's easier for investors to come on board at a later stage. For us, it's been the same. So I owned a record label when I was younger, in my early 20s, and that's we made a lot of those type of mistakes where it was a record label, and when you're going out and events and show money, sometimes is you get it in cash. Sometimes you're dealing with certain promoters, and it's an informal environment, although it's a music business. I kind of saw how we made a lot of mistakes in running that business there, and I learned from that experience. And I can only imagine the mamas in the townships, the people selling vegetables, the hawkers in the streets. You imagine how their bank accounts look like. Do they have books? Do they have accountants that help them? The answer is a lot of them no, they don't. And that's why it's important for organizations like these to put together these type of things, especially in the townships. Formalizing your business is very, very important. Right now, for me to scale up, the talks that I'm having with the players that are coming on board to assist us to grow, that's exactly what they're looking for. Right. They're scrutinizing our books like crazy. Yeah. And they're giving us all these compliments about how well and great we've done over the past couple of years. Why? Because we're very disciplined. We've been disciplined over the past 4 or 5 years. It hasn't been easy. Some of you guys who are entrepreneurs in the crowd, you'd know how difficult it is, but it's a beautiful journey that we all love, this entrepreneurship thing. But if you're disciplined and you treat this business and every little cent that you make out of it as the business's money and it goes back into the business, I think in the long run, it's going to be really good for your business to even grow, for people to come on board and help you grow, because you have to account for every cent. And if you've got the right accountant, and I always say to people, you always have to have the right lawyer as well, you're bound to grow. So formalizing a business is very important. You can't grow a business if we can't see anything, even if your idea looks like it's working, but is it really working on black and white?
Yeah. So start early is what Sibu was saying there, right?
Yes, sir.
Coincidentally, I was in a forum 2 days ago talking about youth unemployment, and there was a breakout session that I was moderating that was talking about formalizing the informal sector. And I was asking, whose interest is it to formalize the informal sector? Whose interest? Like,
whose interest is it? Yes.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, when you formalize the informal sector, yes, it's going to grow, it's going to employ people and everything, but then an organization or an economic activity is known as an informal sector because it is not under government scrutiny and they're not paying taxes and all that. Exactly. So that it is government's responsibility to ensure that they are putting in policies and the support system to formalize the informal sector. I don't blame people that are playing in the informal sector.
Sorry to disturb. Try formalizing the taxi industry in South Africa.
The thing is, trust me, entrepreneurship in Africa primarily is formalizing the informal sector. That's it, really. But unfortunately, most of these programs are either replicating what has worked outside, and when I mean outside Africa, so then we are trying to do the next Uber, the next Microsoft, and because you have 3 minutes to pitch, it's not now that you're going to tell me about the informal sector that has been there for 25 years. You see, so then you have to come and tell me something interesting to show that, Africans can also do it. I think we have to move from that. There's a scenario in Ghana about a company called A1 Bread. Young guy coming out of school, selling bread, on the streets. And then one celebrity thought he was ridiculing him. So took a video of him and put it on Facebook to say that, the current government is failing because graduates are on the street. That was the turn of his business. This guy makes $100,000, 100,000 cedis every day, which is equivalent to $25,000. And he's just selling bread. And bread primarily is in the informal sector. So for me, if we can come up with some of these things, and as part of the scenario, we can look at entrepreneurs that go back to the informal sector and help them, and not just formalize. Don't go with all these terms. Because at the end of the day, what I know is what I do best. And if I've been able to maintain a business for 25 years, there's something I'm doing right. You get it? But we go to school and we wear all these things, and go there and make it look as if these drivers of banking sector, when you go to Ghana, the informal sector is they are the ones that are driving banking sector. They're able to access loan up to $5 million, informal, and his shop is not as big as this speaker. But we go to school with all our degrees and support from Anisha and everything, and then we can't even raise 25,000 cedis. And it's a problem because the mindset and the whole objective of who a young entrepreneur is to be funky and sexy and cool. But I think that if we look at entrepreneurship because Africa by its nature is entrepreneurial. Absolutely. So what are we trying to create that is already not existing? What we need to do is to create young people that will see what has already been happening as attractive enough for them to go back and help formalize it.
And
like agriculture,
and just
agri-sector and all that.
To add on what you're saying, I think the biggest problem also in African countries are banking systems. So when I talk about policy change, that's one of the things I'm talking about, where politicians have to hold banks accountable. Because the bank is very quick to give me 500,000 to go buy a car. But the very same amount of money, 500,000 to open a business, they won't give it to me.
Right. Yes, but no. Listen, I don't blame banks. I've worked as a consultant for a bank in an SME sector before. Listen, no, but we say let's be frank with ourselves. Yeah. If you're an investor in a bank, would you want the bank to invest in a startup? No, because banks are not social enterprises. Yes, there could be a policy that makes a percentage of their profits, into social enterprise. But banks are not, just like MasterCard, really. They make enough profits, and they put some amount of profit into a foundation, and then they help. Because as an investor, you wouldn't get people to put money in your bank if they see you wasting it. Businesses, and I think the panel before us said entrepreneurs are supposed to, we are not beggars. If you're an entrepreneur, you are supposed to be attractive when it comes to investment. You are the one that the investor needs, not the other way around. Right. Because if your business is doing well and is making money, you're not the one even to go and beg. Because if they look at your books, they see that, if I put my money in your business, it's going to do well. Yep. So then they will beg you to take, and the same with the banks. Yeah. In Ghana, when the banking sector was being reformed and all these foreign banks started coming in, they were practically chasing the informal sector to come for loans.
Yeah, absolutely.
So then it's not about, the bank, trust me, at the end of the day, there's so much money available for businesses that are doing well. The question is, who is helping these businesses that have proven track record of sustainability? The business has lasted for 30 years. There's something there. But so the students don't go back and help these businesses to scale up.
We're going to wrap up, and I want also to get us back on track in a very particular way, because as much as we're talking about entrepreneurs,
be passionate.
as much as we're talking about entrepreneurs, our focus very much is on very young entrepreneurs. And just to wrap up, because we have about 4 or 5 minutes left, I just wanted to get each of you to talk about being mentors and the sort of the key bits of advice. And I know we've touched on it in different ways, but I just want to wrap up with this, the key bits of advice you give young, particularly, as we say, the very young entrepreneurs, which a reminder defined as people between 15 and 22. The key, maybe your top 3
Sure.
bits
I'll
of
just
advice.
give one. I think fundamentally what I'm taking away from this conversation is it's a very complex ecosystem that we're working with. And I think that what that tells me is that we need to start young in educating young people about what it is they're getting into. So that they understand banking, they understand company registration, they understand the interactivity between the formal and the informal sector, they understand all of the different ecosystem players and how they interact with them. And if they have that basic knowledge, then they stand a better chance of success as entrepreneurs.
Okay, excellent.
For me, it's actually for young folks to truly redefine what counts. And what I mean by that is that there's a lot of terms, there's a lot of things that's being thrown at you that you're supposed to. It's for you to actually let us know, redefine what counts for you as an individual, as an entrepreneur, as whatever your aspirations are. Because that is the only way you can attract others to join in, to clearly state what you want and what you're trying to achieve. For a young man and for a young woman, and all this is a process that you have to go through, and you have incredible supports around the world and around this room that will continue to assist you in that.
Okay, Echo.
For me, I'll say certificate gives knowledge. I mean, you go to school to get a certificate, you acquire the knowledge, but what the world needs now, especially as dynamic as it is the skill set, which comes from experience and doing it. So for very young entrepreneurs, I think that we should just, most importantly, put them in areas where they get to pick up these things. As somebody said, entrepreneurship cannot be taught or is not taught, it's experienced. So giving them the opportunity to experience, let them find somebody in the area that is doing some sort of a business, attach them to it, and let them see how they can learn off it. And the more interested they get in acquiring this experience, the higher the probability that it's going to stay with them for the rest of their lives. So.
Okay.
Give them the opportunity to experience.
Give them the opportunity to get the experience.
Exactly.
I echo his words. The doing parts. The doing is really important. Your business plan can look really great on paper, but eventually when they give you that money for you to go out there into the market, your business fails. So it's about you actually getting it done. I do know that a lot of the young people, we always complain about capital, we don't have money to start, but you always have something to start somehow. So just start and get it going, and putting in the work will actually give an opportunity to make a lot of mistakes and learn as you go. And as you go, I always say to people, if you've got a good heart and you've researched your industry well enough, and you're really a hard worker, you're sort of sending that type of energy to the universe. And somehow God is going to respond. And he brings resources as you go. So a lot of the times young people are waiting for somebody to fund them, or for the right period, or to get the right time for me to resign from my job and go start. And they keep postponing and postponing and postponing, and they don't start. But just start, throw yourself in the field with the lions, roll with the punches, learn as you go, and be in an environment of people that are around a similar journey, just like you guys are here today. Go to these conferences when your friends are going to parties all the time. Go to these seminars, read these books, go out there, go sell in the streets. One of the kids sent me a message on my Facebook yesterday, and he said, Sbu, out of the Mofire videos that have been going viral selling in the streets, I took a lesson from that, and I went to, he's an artist, he draws people. He says, I used to always complain that nobody is helping me because I draw these drawings and put them on social media and tag celebrities, and nobody's helping me. So he says, I adopted your strategy. I started drawing these famous people that I know that a lot of ordinary people like, and then I started going to sell my drawings. He says, I've sold over 100 drawings to date. So once you start with the little that you have, the universe will respond.
Okay, that's fantastic. Thank you very much to an excellent panel. And there you have it. Just get out there, do it. Don't sit at home and expect your business to start by itself. You have to be out there, and you have to be willing to work with partners and mentors such as the people on this panel and we have at the summit. But we're going to wrap up there, and thank you very much to everyone watching at home on CNBC and to the audience here in the room. Thank you.